All right, thank you, Zoom. All right, before we get into the meat of the program, I do want to highlight a couple of other upcoming events in this series for you. So, next Tuesday, March 31st, at the same time, we'll host another webinar focused on transit in the region during the World Cup. So, we'll hear from leaders at Kimley Horn, WashDOT, Sound Transit, King County Metro, and Seattle Department of Transportation about how they're planning to facilitate everyone moving around the region this summer. And then Wednesday, April 15th, at the same time, we'll look at forecasts on visitor spending, market demand, and business opportunities tied to the Seattle hosted matches. We'll also talk in that webinar about Welcoming the World playbook, offering practical guidance on how communities and businesses can honor and engage our visiting nations. You can find all the resources and all of our webinar recordings and upcoming events and more on the Chambers World Cup Ready page. So be sure to sign up for our newsletter there too. With that, let's get into the program. You are not here today to hear from me. I will introduce Erin Combs, founder and principal at Artio Strategies, and Todd Olsen, senior vice president of marketing practice at Mother Bear. So today's session, we're going to focus on turning World Cup excitement into real results for your business. Erin and Todd are going to share a practical training created for small businesses and retailers, sharing data-backed insights on why Sportsline messaging works and how to use it authentically. They'll share creative ways to engage fans and locals, set smart goals for the games, choose the right place to advertise, and just tap into all of the excitement. So, Todd and Erin, I hand it over to you.
Thanks, Lee. So great to see everyone, or not see, great to be with everyone today. Super excited to have this conversation. So just to kick things off, as Lee mentioned, our goal is really to keep this conversation really practical, for the small and mid-sized business community. So this conversation is not intended to be about big brand sponsorships, but really intended for businesses like yours to help really show up and benefit and take advantage of this moment when the World Cup is here. So our goal is just to provide a framework to really think about this moment and make it make sense for your business, and then also share a few things that you can sort of practically do next. So just by way of introduction, my name is Erin Combs. I am the founder of Artio Strategies, which is a local consultancy based here in Seattle. I also am the director of brand management for Puyallup Tribal Enterprises. And in that role, I oversee and manage all of the marketing efforts for the tribe's World Cup partnership, which I will share just a little bit more about later. By way of background, I've led brand marketing and community engagement for quite some time here in the Seattle area, originally with nonprofit and mission-driven organizations. And then the bulk of my career has been in the corporate sector with Starbucks, Lyft, Amazon. And across that my career have really developed kind of a professional niche, and also a real passion for partnership marketing, in particular sports and entertainment marketing. And so this notion of how businesses show up in the community around big cultural sports and entertainment moments is very near and dear to my heart. So Todd, I'll kick it over to you to share a little bit about your background.
Great. Thanks, Erin. Nice to meet you all. Thanks for coming. Very exciting time. I am Todd Olsen. I lead strategy and AI for Mother Bear Agency. We're a women-owned independent marketing strategy and PR agency here in Seattle. I'm a longtime Seattleite. I have about 30 years experience in marketing and strategy. I love helping big brands and small brands find their story and tell it in a way that's authentic and stands out. And that's what we want to talk about today. I've had the honor to work on some iconic brands like Starbucks, at Starbucks with Erin, but also some really fun projects over the last few years on Rover, Rad Power Bikes, Metropolitan Market, to name a few. And I'll just say before we get started, a lot of the work we do and the principles behind it transcends the size of the company. A lot of the marketing principles and tenets that we share and adhere to are universal. And they seem simple, but simple is actually what works in marketing. And so we're excited to share some of this with you. Right? Sorry. Okay. Um, okay, so this is a mix of company sizes and types, and we know that. It's actually a really diverse mix of participants here at the chamber and on this call. But we really want to orient towards small to mid-sized businesses. So especially those who don't have the resources of a full marketing team, this is for you. So think small, mid-size restaurants, retail, hospitality. We saw a lot of tourism and neighborhood and uh, city organizations on the list, leaner teams without big budgets who are close to their customer. So this isn't about big sponsorship. We're going to use some examples that have big brands behind them, so because you might recognize them, and it's kind of easy to find and talk about those. But that doesn't mean this is for big brands with big budgets. Um, we're not here to give you a top 10 checklist of, you know, media budgets, et cetera, et cetera. Really, we're focusing because everybody's different and there's no one size fits all strategy. So instead of a checklist, we want to give you a framework that's very simple that you can make your own and apply it towards the event and especially beyond the event.
Yeah, so I think a lot of us have seen some of these numbers, but just to ground, the FIFA World Cup coming to Seattle really is a once in a generation moment. There's going to be six matches played at the stadium. Expecting somewhere between 750 and 1 million visitors into the Seattle and Greater Puget Sound region. I think some of us have seen these revenue estimates, but estimating close to $929 million in revenue for the region. So there's no question that this is a really big moment. I think the real key here to take away, though, is that most of that spending and visitor traffic is happening outside the stadium. So there's only six matches, but all of the economic activity is really happening before and after those matches. And so every business, regardless of the size, really has an opportunity to show up. Um, and so that's the way that we want to kind of think about how to approach marketing during the World Cup is that this really is an opportunity to introduce your business to the world, but also to the region. And so we want to encourage businesses to really think about both the short term and the long term opportunity. That yes, this is absolutely a moment to sort of capitalize on the global traffic, those million people that are going to be coming through the Puget Sound region. 100% opportunity to capture that foot traffic that's coming through. This is also really a moment to build a long-lasting relationship with your customers and the local community that are going to be here with you long after the World Cup. And so really sort of orienting around both that global, but also local and short-term and long-term opportunity moment.
So excuse me. So with that, we've assembled 5 key principles to think about as the World Cup approaches. And again, may seem simple, but the best marketing principles are, and we're going to go into detail on each one of these, but they are: define your success, meet the moment, be discoverable, be welcoming, and think beyond the event.
So the first principle of define what your success looks like. Like, what does success actually look like for your business? I will say this is one of my favorites. I think it's one of the most important steps. It's also, funny enough, a step that a lot of businesses that Todd and I work with tend to miss. I think the tendency, especially when something as exciting as the World Cup is happening, that we want to jump right into tactics without really stopping to take a beat and really identify what success looks like specifically for an individual business. It's not a one size fits all solution. And frankly, what winning looks like in June may look a lot different than what winning looks like at the year end of the year in December. So before sort of jumping into tactics, really taking a step to ask what success looks like for you. So once you do that, it can really become a filter, and it can help sort of, you know, uh, provide the criteria to filter out ideas or tactics that are going to meet your objectives, and then deprioritize things that are not going to directly meet your tactics or meet your objectives. So what that looks like I mentioned, this notion of sort of short term and long term. In the short term, there certainly is increased visitor revenue, particularly for businesses that may have a storefront, retail businesses, those in the hospitality sector. There's absolutely kind of a transactional foot traffic, more revenue, more customers, goal in the short term. There also, though, is a really big opportunity to engage employees. This is something I will mention a couple of additional times because I think it's something that's really, really important for businesses of all sizes, is not to forget about the employee engagement and the employee experience, particularly for retail and hospitality, as those are sort of the frontline, the frontline representation for your business. It also could be an opportunity to launch something new. In the long term, really thinking about what the World Cup moment can do to serve your brand long term. That may be local awareness and engagement. So building that repeat customer traffic, building the repeat occasions for the local community to come back and continue to frequent your business. That might be thinking about brand love, like how do brands just sort of, build a, improve their reputation, or build affinity through a moment like the World Cup. And then, like I mentioned, that sustained traffic and revenue, sort of like that repeat customer occasion for customers coming back. So all of these are very, very valid goals, but again, they're going to look a little bit different for every business, depending on the size of the business, the location of the business, and what industry or what service the business is providing. But really taking a moment to intentionally define what this looks like, and also how you'll measure it, is an incredibly important step that we want to start with. Um, so just to give a couple of examples of this, um, so as I mentioned, I serve as the director of brand for Puyallup Tribal Enterprises and work with the Puyallup Tribe on their World Cup partnership. So the tribe is the official host sponsor for the World Cup in Seattle. This is a very historic moment. There's never been an Indigenous nation that's been formally represented at the World Cup prior to Puyallup. And so for the tribe, we've been very, very intentional about using the World Cup partnership as a moment to share the tribe's culture. So yes, we are thinking about some of the businesses that the tribe owns, the casino, the non-gaming businesses. That is definitely part of the equation. But really, the number one goal for the tribe through this World Cup moment is using it as an opportunity to share their culture and to further understanding about their culture among a broad audience. And the tribe's been really intentional with this goal. And so this is a couple of examples. We recently launched the tribe's website, which you can see is all about coming together. The tribe will be hosting cultural events, so not necessarily business driving, but really events, a World Cup powwow, a traditional stick games. So really using this moment as an opportunity to introduce and raise awareness and educate the broader community about the tribe's culture. The second example that we wanted to share is really more of a small business example. I mentioned that idea of employee engagement, which again, I think is something that is oftentimes overlooked, but incredibly valuable for businesses of all sizes. These are things that can be easily done if employee engagement fits into your plans. So things like wearing team colors at work or having team watch parties, having, bagels and coffee on match day or a bracket with gear and prizes. There's all kinds of ways to think about really identifying If engaging employees is one of the key goals for your business during this moment in time, matching tactics back to meet that goal.
I mean, look at how much fun these people are having. Um, okay, so meet the moment is our next one, and kind of the subhead here is relevance beats perfection. We're not going for perfection here. We're getting in the game, and we're getting in the game in a way that is authentic to us, and allows us to show up in a way that sends signals of authenticity. And so why that's important is customers spend with brands that share their values. So you want to connect in a thoughtful way that shares your values, and that allows people to see them and align with you and create a relationship. And so it's all about building relationships versus transactions is how we think about this. And customers are smart and they can instantly sense inauthenticity. So what that looks like to us is showing up in a way that feels natural to you. So tapping into the energy of the event, participating in the moment, showing, being a fan, right? Sharing the enthusiasm and finding little ways to connect with fans. And you want to avoid generic messaging or being super gimmicky, or doing anything that isn't aligned with your brand. And we think you have to do more than, you know, slap a logo, you know, on your next to your brand in an ad, right? So how can you be more thoughtful and connect the dots to something that's meaningful for you and then will also be meaningful in turn for your customers? And also, don't treat it as an aggregate event. Treat it as a series of moments, individual moments that you want to be ready for. So know like which match is happening that day and when and kind of what it's going to look like. Is it Australia? Maybe you have a message for the Australian fans. Is it US? Is it Canada? So do the math, do the homework, and just take a little bit of time to show up with authenticity. Here's an example of, using polling. So one thing people love is to be asked their opinion. So, maybe there are different ways. Like this is a simple example of a classic cafe chalkboard, but this idea can be manifest however you stay in touch with your customers or team. So, this could be not only a POS sign, but it could also be a customer nurture email, could take the form of a team meeting, or it could take the form of a series of social media posts. Again, the most important thing is to stay in the game, to get in the game. And then this is an example of, Top Pot every year has probably the 12s donut. I don't know if they call it the Seahawks donut, but it's clearly blue and green sprinkled, and it's there for people who want to celebrate on a Sunday morning on game day, and it's kind of iconic, right? And for them, it's it's the cost of green and blue sprinkles, but it means so much more to people. Like my kids would always demand that we go and buy these donuts on Sundays. So it's just a small thing. Maybe you have a version of this that you can put out into the Seattle community during this event.
The other thing that I would add, just briefly on the Top Pod example, that this image that we grabbed was actually from King 5. And so while, earned media is never a guarantee with things like this, I do think that it's notable that there are a lot of examples of small businesses that are, doing fun things like meeting the moment, getting in the game, as Todd said, that end up getting the attention of media that are really looking to fill time during the World Cup and other sporting events. And so they're kind of the extra value add here is that it's not only customer engagement, it also is storytelling and potential media engagement as well. This last example that we had, I personally love this example. So this is from the Seattle Police Department. I don't know if anyone on this call was following the SPD during the Seahawks Super Bowl parade last month. But the whole Seattle Police Department social media channel was all about their chief hype coordinator. And they had all of this content that they were putting out about, about engaging with fans. There was way too many examples to pull, but there are things that they're saying about like, we're not excited, you're excited. Seriously though, if you need anything other than a parking spot, find a uniformed officer. And then they're sprinkling things in about, to the fan who tried to hand a donut to Barner, great hustle, but I prefer you stay behind the barriers. To the guy throwing Skittles, please stop. I admire the throwback energy, but let's keep it to a minimum. And so, this idea that they were really delivering the message that they wanted to get across with telling people to stay off the pergola in Pioneer Square and stay behind the barriers, they were delivering the message that they needed to deliver as the police department, but were doing it in an incredibly authentic and engaging way that truly met the moment and frankly just caught people's attention. I mean, you saw, people commenting under the police department posts like, this is the greatest social media I've ever seen. And for the police department, that's a pretty incredible feat. So I love this example of an organization that really kind of captured the moment in a really authentic way.
Yeah, I want to add, actually, we spend a lot of time with clients defining their brand personality, and we define it so that they can move forward with consistency across, um, different collaborators on a brand, so employees or agencies or marketing team or social media team. So I think this is also just a really great example of communicating in a good brand personality. That is here, it's hooking you in with humor, but it's also firm, right? Like it's not wishy-washy. It's bringing you in with humor to the fan who tried to hand a donut to Barner, great hustle, but then with a little bit of directive, which is stay behind the barriers, right? So I think it's just a really nice combination. Good job, SPD. Okay, this one we think this one's really important. And it's important. It's also a very interesting space because it's completely changing. It's fluid because of AI, and you can take advantage of that fluidity. And so we'll give you a couple tips and tricks here. But basically, a deep thought: if you're not found, you don't exist, right? That means digital, right? Everybody has a phone in their hand. Everybody is going to be using their phone to find the things they want in the moment. That means people from here. That means everybody that's visiting. People are planning right now for their trip to Seattle. They're doing research now. So, there's a few things you can do to kind of spruce things up, and to make sure you're discoverable. Know the tools, right? So where is your digital footprint? And a lot of it is neighborhood based, a lot of it is local based. Um, SEO, if you have a website, go in and enter the metadata of who you are, what your company delivers, and for whom. That doesn't cost you anything. Um, Update your Google business profile, add current photos, make sure you're soliciting reviews. Reviews matter. Make sure your hours and descriptions are up to date and on point. And then what you can do to take a step further is to, play a little bit of offense is create some blog posts. If you have a newsletter, send some news to people about the event and what you're going to be doing. 5 ways to celebrate the World Cup with us. Top things to do in Beacon Hill. Another thing to think about is the 1+1=3 effect. So partnerships and collabs double your footprint, and they tell Google or AI search terms that it makes it more likely they're going to find you, and it tells them that you're legitimate because they're looking for triangulation that point back to your site as a high authority source. So think about, your neighbors. Is there anything you guys can do together? Can you make it a party? Can you make it bigger? And some of the tools that we like to use are, MailChimp, HubSpot, take advantage of Square. If you're a retailer using Square, they have an unlock that you can tap into. Um, and there's a couple more I'll show you on this next one. Okay, so this is hot off the press kind of news that we're kind of discovering, then we're sharing with our clients in terms of um, 62% of internet users used AI to search for something at least once this week. That's the data. So by far, people are still using um, Google and neighborhood Google search tools. However, this is no new news to you. As AI is here, and it's relevant and it's in the mix, and so we can take advantage of that. And so one of the things we like to do is search for yourself on ChatGPT and see how many prompts it takes from general to more specific search for your brand to show up, and then see what the link where the sources are. So here's, I searched for I did a search across the board for best donuts in Seattle, and I used 4 different tools. So this is ChatGPT. You can see Eater Seattle here. You can see Seattle Met. Here's another Eater Seattle. That's interesting. What maybe you should send some donuts to the Eater Seattle staff, right? Like, how can you use that information um, to understand how you can be more discoverable? This is Reddit. Reddit, there's a huge conversation going on at every single level, at the micro level on Reddit about everything. And we recently went to New York City and did a bunch of we spent a lot of time, where are we going to eat? A lot of that time was spent on Reddit. And guess what? AI is using Reddit to give their recommendation to the people who are searching. This is Yelp, of course. Spend a little time on Yelp, tidy things up a little bit. And then Google Maps is all about reviews and making sure your neighborhood business is up to speed.
Yeah, so the next pillar we call be welcoming, and this is the idea of really thinking like a visitor. Thinking like a visitor. So if you were someone that walked into Seattle, either from outside Seattle, perhaps outside Washington State, or even outside the country, what would confuse you if you walked into the city? And so this is important because customers may not be from here. In fact, many of them won't be. There may be different languages, different expectations, different needs. And so the idea here is for the business community to get in front of that and really being the solution that customers may not know that they needed. Frankly, this also is very closely related to the idea of meeting the moment. But even if your customer base or even if your target audience is locals, how can you really celebrate and acknowledge the global nature of the event and really solve problems that customers don't know that they're going to don't know that they're going to have. So what that looks like, maybe providing solutions for people that are traveling, things like concierges, things people that are walking, things people that don't know where they're going, removing any friction in the experience, like Todd mentioned with the discoverability piece. Updating those Google reviews, like letting people know about your business before they get here, and really making it easy. So things like clear signage, menus, translations, multilingual or international touches. These are all sort of like little things that go towards really helping to create a welcoming environment and addressing those problems for customers that they didn't know that they had. So a couple of examples of this one. This first one was an example from the London Olympics in 2012. During the Olympics in 2012, there were a number of pubs that created lost tourist menus. And the idea behind that was to sort of demystify some of the traditional British pub offerings. So things like bangers and mash and scotch and eggs or Yorkshire pudding. So things that are, they're menus that are written in English, but very traditional British pub fare, creating, translations or descriptions for what they called lost tourists. So I sort of love this example that it's a little tongue in cheek, but also very much relevant and sort of solving a problem and reducing that friction. Um, Another example was from the Rio Olympics, where small food vendors in Rio, I wasn't able to find a picture of this, unfortunately, but there were stories from Rio where small food vendors realized that language was a real barrier to ordering from their, from their shops. And so street vendors started doing things like creating numbered combos or using flags and icons instead of written words or text, or helping customers to like using photographic menus, like helping customers just sort of point and speak. So there's a lot of examples of things like that where again it's just a matter of like reducing the friction in the pathway from of someone that's visiting that might not know the area to frequenting your business. The second example that we had here that I also think is sort of fun. Cheesesteaks in New Orleans for the Eagles Super Bowl. So Bradley Cooper has a food truck, a cheesesteak food truck. Apparently, he's a big Philadelphia Eagles fan. And so when the Philadelphia Eagles played in the Super Bowl in New Orleans, Bradley Cooper and his business partner drove their food truck from Philadelphia out to New Orleans for the Super Bowl. And while that might seem like kind of just like just sort of a tactic to like sell more cheesesteaks, what ended up happening was that this cheesesteak food truck became kind of a cultural mecca for Philadelphia fans in New Orleans. So they set up sort of near the Super Bowl activity zones. But it became like a cultural home base. And so they were solving the problem for fans that wanted something familiar, that wanted representation from their hometown and from their home team. And they provided the solution in a different city. And so again, I just really love this idea of like organically and authentically sort of meeting fans where they're at and solving that problem that they didn't know that they had. So the next one is thinking beyond the event. And so I've mentioned this before, but really the value with this World Cup is what's happening outside of match days. There's going to be a lot of traffic, but it's going to be over 6 matches over a 6 week period of time. And so really thinking about what's happening before and after the matches, in addition to what's happening during match days. This is important because that matches last for a day, but the excitement is here and will live on a long time after that. And so businesses really have an opportunity to capitalize. So what this looks like, this is again thinking about like one-time visits, but not just thinking about one-time visits and one-time transactions, but also thinking about repeat customers. So thinking in surround sound, like going beyond transactions, thinking about how to capture emails, loyalty programs, building social media followings. So when those customers are on the street, how do you build a relationship with them so that they will continue to frequent your business and also your brand long after the World Cup matches? This also is about building anticipation leading up to and after the event and really giving people a reason to remember you. So that we are going to share, we promised that this was not about big sponsorships, but we are going to share one example from Starbucks just because I do think it's a relevant one. So Starbucks had a partnership with, still does have a partnership with the Seahawks. When Starbucks got into this partnership with the Seahawks, it was not about the match or the game day experience. Starbucks' presence at the time inside the stadium was actually quite limited. And so what they did with that sponsorship during Seahawks games was actually pretty finite. What Starbucks did with the partnership, though, was really think outside of the game day experience at the stadium. So they celebrated every Blue Friday with putting, flags on the Starbucks building downtown. Thought about employee engagement and printed Seahawks t-shirts and gave them to all of the baristas in the Seattle area, which was a really exciting thing for Starbucks baristas at the time to get to break dress code on Fridays. And then have a t-shirt that they get to take home. There were employees that built their own Seahawks beverages and a Seahawks Frappuccino, which then Starbucks put on their menu at stores all throughout the city. There were a couple of different days that Starbucks had people literally just run through downtown on the streets of downtown and hand out gift cards just as sort of a surprise and delight for fans on Blue Fridays. And so all of this together, I think, is a really nice example of a company that, yes, is a big partnership, but is really thinking outside of how they show up in the stadium and really thinking kind of outside the box, literally.
Legion of Brew. I wish I'd written that line. That's good.
That was a good one.
Okay, another example, a small example, but just example of using the tools to create a conversation. So, a marketing principle we use is that depth is always better than breadth. So, if you do the math on what we would call a customer's lifetime value to you in revenue from their very first purchase to their very last purchase, and what it costs to acquire them through paid means like Google search, for example, not inexpensive. You'd much rather build a long-term relationship with a frequent regular, then one regular is worth 10 new, right? So what that means is you have to build an emotional connection and you have to stay hyper relevant to stay connected with them and be super responsive to them and anticipate what they're looking for. And in this case, Freelard Tamales did a great job not only on the personality side, like catching your attention. This is from Square, right? So they're just using the POS tool. Um, we invite you to make your own damn tamales. And what they're doing is they're inviting you to a tamale making event, which I'm sure sold out very, very quickly. Um, what they're doing is creating community and they're creating long-term relationships versus transactions.
Yeah, and then lastly, and then we'll, stop talking and happy to answer any questions or dive deeper into anything we've covered. But really wanting to just reinforce some of the tools that are out there. So some of these are from the Chamber, the Small Business Mega Event Playbook. The Seattle Sports Commission has created a watch party playbook specifically for the World Cup. Visit Seattle has done some work around creating a community brand. So recognizing that businesses are very extremely limited in what they're able to use in terms of FIFA logos and branding. Visit Seattle has put together a whole branding playbook for businesses to use a community brand. And then also, lastly, a playbook around how employers can prevent human trafficking, which we know unfortunately tends to spike during large events like the World Cup and the Olympics and Super Bowl. So really just want to reinforce and point folks back to some of these really wonderful resources that are out there to take advantage of. So with that, we're happy to handle any questions that folks may have or can dive deeper into any part of this.
Excuse me. Thank you so much. That was very informative. I am not in marketing, but you made me wish I was. That was great. So let's see here. Um, I'm not sure that this question is really in your realm, but maybe you can share where you got the information from. And I would point this person actually to our upcoming webinar in April, where we'll talk more about who all is coming. But this person was curious about the estimate of 1 million visitors. Is that from outside or also including people in the region who will somehow participate in activities related to World Cup, and may take the place of their typical visitors since their hotel is usually full in June and July anyway?
Oh, got it. So I will caveat that I do not, this is a number that has come from other sources, so I will caveat that I'm not the sole expert on this one. So there have been numbers that have been sort of tossed around and sort of widely publicized from 750 to a million visitors. My understanding, based on what I have read and has been reported by other news sources, is that that is a combination of both local traffic as well as visiting traffic. Again, my understanding, and I don't want to misspeak, but my understanding of it is that when they say local traffic, that is traffic from outside the Seattle area. So, but that may be other parts of Washington, so outside of the city specifically, but not necessarily global traffic. So that is my best understanding is that it's a combination of both local visitors and regional visitors.
Thank you. I think that is my understanding of it as well. But Derek, that was your question. And again, I would point you to our April 15th webinar, where we'll have folks from Visit Seattle talking more about the actual forecasting on visitor spending and where people are coming from.
I also will add, Lee, just
Mhm.
quickly. I had a conversation with Visit Tacoma actually, and so I know that both visitor bureaus are actively updating those projections as they're getting more data in. And so I would just echo that the upcoming conversation is probably a really good resource because those that data is being updated in real time.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any suggestions for ideas that a business could do who is not hosting a watch party? This person says that small businesses seem to be getting stuck in that box and are wanting to hear how we could encourage them to get creative with other promotions.
Yeah, hosting a watch party is a lot, I will say. I mean, I think there's no shortage of ideas. I think, it does go back to where we started with sort of what are the goals that you're trying to achieve? Is it really bringing traffic in? Is it employees? There's a whole laundry list of places you could go down for both directions. On the traffic driving front doing things like we talked about sort of that, those like those fun promotional things like that's like the Seahawks Top Pot donut. We actually had another example that we didn't share from some small businesses in Kansas City that have been capitalizing on the Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce engagement where, there was a bakery that launched a Swifty collection that was by no means an official collaboration, but just kind of trying to like update their product launch and do some sort of fun things that felt very timely. We saw some examples of businesses that have done like a pop-up concierge on the street. So if your, business is perhaps located downtown or somewhere centrally located, to sort of, position yourself as like a stop, like a drop-in concierge for people that may be looking for places to go and things like that. So I think we could keep on brainstorming. I think there's a lot of different, avenues to sort of start to go. And as you start to think about those things, there really are a lot of options outside of hosting an official watch party, that you could just keep sort of brainstorming about.
I have one thought is also like I think it's such a good question because every you don't want to be the brand that's doing everything at the same time everybody else is doing it, right? So that's one thing. And another is don't do it alone, right? So think about what's before, right? So I think even more effective than a watch party where you're competing with all the other watch parties and it's crowded and nobody can find parking anyway, have a pre-party and bring in, one of the local neighborhood side like Ballard FC and have them give a talk on, soccer 101 or, what or if we know Australia is playing, right? Like Australia foods and customs 101 and bring in the authority of Australia here in Seattle or like make it again think about the 1 + 1 = 3 and think about collaboration and not trying to do everything on your own and think about staying away from creating your own pocket away from the noise.
Yeah, Todd, that's a great idea. Also, is thinking about like what are the other events that are already happening in addition to the matches? Like where are the other watch parties that you can sort of tag onto as a pre or a post, or what are the other activities that are, what are the other events that are taking place in your specific neighborhood? I know the local organizing committee announced recently that they are taking kind of a decentralized, there's like a decentralized approach to fan zones where different neighborhoods are hosting fan zones. So when those fan zones are happening in your neighborhood, like how are you sort of tagging on to the before or the after? Like Todd just said, to sort of build on the excitement that's already happening.
Excuse me. So I'm hearing kind of connect with your neighbors, use what's in your area, stay informed. Someone asked specifically about how to connect with brands to partner or do, co-promotions. Do you have anything to say in that space?
With brands like other like I'm sorry, what kind of brands? Like large brands
I'm
or
assuming that's what they meant in this question, yes.
um yeah, go ahead, Todd.
Oh, just think about a brand that you'd like to partner with and think about whether what you bring to the table, right? Because a lot of brands, maybe they've already spent a lot of money on either, hosting an event, they're committed, right? And maybe you can bring something that will make their event or sponsorship better because of what your unique value proposition is or the customers that you bring to the table are. I would think there, like trying to find a creative partner where you both get something bigger as a result of teaming up, and that makes it, less about cash investment and more about um, community and partnership.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. But having spent most of my career at larger brands and running partnerships for larger brands, the that is always the approach that I've found works best, regardless of the size of the business, is really thinking about what the reciprocal exchange is. So it's not necessarily an exchange of money one direction or the other, but what assets do both brands bring to the table that can benefit each other? So if a large brand is hosting a watch party, what can a smaller company do that would, that would add and supplement and improve the experience for fans that are going to be at that event, but would also provide meaningful visibility or engagement for the brand coming in. So really thinking about like how do you find like mutually beneficial partnership opportunities, and then approaching it that way.
Great, thank you. Jill is asking if you can touch a little bit more about the use of social media to promote during World Cup season.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I would use the tools, right? Like, be sure and be careful when you're using, official World Cup logos. Use the toolkit, use the links and some of the specific information that's being shared from the chamber. Um, uh, so that's one. And then secondly, like think about it as a series of conversations that add up to a bigger conversation. So start now and think think about it as a series of 15 posts instead of three leading up to game day posts, I guess would be one piece of advice.
Yeah, I also would go back to the example that we shared with the Seattle Police Department, that by far and away the most engaging social media content is engaging, right? It's not really like it's not a matter of like a one-way push of information. It really is like building a conversation with the followers on the other end. And so thinking about social media that's really authentic to your brand, but how to open a conversation, and to do it in a fun way. They're the most successful social media threads are always tend to be um, a little provocative and in a brand appropriate sort of way. So, a little witty, a little, you know what I mean? Just finding like what that like little bit of edge is that feels really authentic for what your particular business is. is going to generate the most engagement in social media.
And just in form factor, like mix it up. Like we the data that we see on social media engagement and posts, um, it's all UCG, so user generated content. So think about your team sharing 30-second videos of what they're excited about or what they love most about Seattle, for example. And that I'll guarantee you that those will perform better on social media than a set piece, perfectly crafted photo or video or something that you spent all this time trying to design perfectly. Imperfection does better than perfection right now, especially if it's POV team member or unique POV, like opening up the tent and saying, "Hey, you know what? Here's how we're preparing, and we're excited to see you." Right? Like behind the tent stuff works really well too.
Cool, thank you. You shared a lot of great ideas, and I think I heard a few pitfalls, but are there any kind of common mistakes that you're anticipating folks might make in trying to tap into this opportunity that you would want to warn against?
That's a really good question. I think one that I would put out there, and I know that this has been covered more so by Visit Seattle and others, but I would use caution in using FIFA IP. That I think sticking to like your own, like just tapping into your own excitement at the community level. You really don't need the logos to, have people know that it's the World Cup. Like people know, and really tapping into the conversation in a more authentic way rather than getting too focused on using the logos outside of a formal partnership is I would strongly suggest. Todd, do you have any?
Go to the logistics webinar that was promoted at the beginning of this thing because that sounds like really useful information. Don't get caught off guard.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Can folks contact either of you after this if they have additional questions, and how would you like them to do that?
Yeah, I think we included our email on the last you're welcome to share emails. At
Yeah,
least
Okay.
yeah,
we would love that.
we both include
Okay.
contact information. So happy to do that.
Okay, wonderful. So we'll send out a post-event email with the recording link, and we can make sure that's highlighted there. Let's see. I think that's all we really have time for today. I guess I would start with, or end maybe with, people should already be planning this, right? I mean, are we too far out still? Do they need to wait? What's the ideal timeline here?
We are not too far out.
Okay.
I don't have my countdown right in front of me, but we're less than 100 days.
Yes.
Erin's feeling a
I'm
little bit of
definitely
fear
I'm
every morning
definitely
she
feeling
wakes up.
it. Yeah, no, we are less than 100 days to go. And no, I don't think it's too early. I don't think it's too early in the slightest. And frankly, the more that the entire community, including the business community, is doing to both prepare but also to generate excitement, I think the more successful it will be across the board. So no, I don't think it's too early at all.
Time to lace up the sneakers.
Great. All right. Well, thank you both so much. That was a great presentation. Thanks to everyone for attending. Again, watch for that post-event email. Check out the Chamber's resource page for this recording and other information. And we'll see you all at another event soon. Thank you.
Thank you.